Welcome back to Render Time, the podcast for video editors by video editors. I'm your host, Blake Tamble, a video editor here at MarketScale. In today's episode, we're taking a deeper dive into storytelling. Now, we've already talked about storytelling in episode 3 of Render Time, so if you haven't heard that one yet, I'd strongly recommend that you go check it out. That episode emphasizes the artistry of storytelling. In this episode, we'll focus more on the technical aspects that go into telling the story as concisely as possible. Today, I'm joined by my fellow MarketScale editors, Cole DeVore and Luke Davis. Cole and Luke are both seasoned editors with an intuition for telling stories, both in editing and in life. We'll discuss in detail the process they use to make their stories stick with the audience long after the video is over. But before that, let's do some introductions. Cole and Luke, could you tell us a little bit about your storytelling backgrounds?
So my storytelling background started back in college with my first ever editing job. I worked for Oregon State University, and I went to school there. And I worked on a lot of documentary pieces. That gave me a really strong base with my storytelling. A few years after that, I got more into freelance, and I shot and edited some wedding films. That was true storytelling because you take a day's worth of footage and you try to condense it into sort of the story of their relationship and the magic of that day. So both of those experiences really, I feel, gave me a strong start with storytelling.
Cole, I'm glad to hear you say that you started in documentary, because I sort of started on the other side with like narrative stuff. In high school, I made my first short film, and then I made a few in college. I've done a bunch of sketches, like sketch comedy stuff. I do stand up. That's all stories, but it's more like in the narrative form or like the planned form. So it sounds like we got both sides of the brain covered here.
Now, in the true spirit of editing, it might be helpful to eliminate the bad before we focus on the good. So, in the most constructive way possible, could you tell us some things that you see editors doing wrong as it relates to storytelling?
Yeah, I think the most cardinal sin I see editors make is when they just take a massive soundbite and just plunk it down, add B-roll, add music, and kind of just call it a day. So like all the pieces are there, but there's just this massive excess. It's like a menu item that incorporates just too many foods.
Mm-hmm. Like the Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah, exactly. It's like let's focus on what's good instead of trying to be big.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess just in short, the thing I see editors doing wrong is just kind of sometimes maybe being a little bit lazy and just not using the critical thinking to really trim the fat.
Yeah, I was also similarly going to say structure. So there isn't a clear structure at times. You definitely want to have an intro, kind of an introduction into the story you'll be telling, introduce characters, maybe a problem that they're facing, clear middle, and then a conclusion, maybe how they solve the problem, that sort of thing. In addition, I would say pacing is pretty obvious when it's off. Maybe they're trying to cram way too much into 1 minute or 2 minutes, and they need to either cut out some sound bites or just extend the video and give it a little breathing room.
Yeah, that is a good point. I feel like a lot of times people will be afraid to just focus on like one point. You know, like maybe the person has like 2 or 3 different like lanes that they could go in, and they're like, well, let's just say it all. And it's like, well, it's actually a little bit more confusing, you know, because the viewer isn't going to watch the hour-long interview, you know. So I feel like for me personally, what gets hard is when I'm like, okay, how do I condense this to make it make sense to the viewer? Because I know what the story is because I've listened to the whole hour, you know. So like, how do you condense that to 3 to 5 minutes usually?
Totally. Yeah. I would say something that is important for that is to know exactly what kind of story the client wants, what they're trying to say with this particular video, and that'll give you a little guidance into what you need and what you can scrap.
Now that we've discussed what not to do, could you both detail for us the process for telling the story the right way?
For me, the most important thing is to have a really strong grasp of the dialogue. I mean, that's the base of the story. You definitely want to listen to every interview answer in the entirety and know it inside and out. And while you're doing that, you can even start to pull out some really impactful or important sound bites, maybe ditch some that aren't so important or don't add to the story. Knowing the dialogue inside and out really gives you a kind of a clear road to take with the story.
I remember one time when I was in college, someone told me that I was a bad storyteller.
What?
And I always considered myself a good storyteller, and so it hurt my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But when they told me that, I practiced, and I think storytelling takes practice. Not everyone is a natural storyteller, and when someone's telling a story in life, it's their responsibility to edit it properly and kind of learn how to tell it to keep the audience engaged. And a lot of people don't really have that practice, don't practice it. Us editors, we have the tools at our command to make those edits to their story. If someone's talking about their company's history in a video for like 5 minutes, they told the story. It's in there. They just didn't tell it succinctly. So it's kind of your job as the editor to find the diamond in the rough. And as far as my literal process, I've said this before in the audio episode that we did a few months ago, and I'll say it again because this stuff is just all related. It really starts with the sound and the sound bite. You got to take that sound bite, just trim it down to its bare bones, no fat, just streamline story beats. Don't worry about having too many cuts. You can always, don't worry about like camera shakes or whatever. You can always go back, cover that with B-roll, worry about it later. Focus on the sound at the beginning, boil down the sound bite, and then once I have the sound bite, I add the music. And I'm still not even looking at the footage. I add the music, mix it in with the sound bite, and then play it back and just listen. And before I know how this video looks, I know how it sounds, and then that just kind of tells me like how it should look. Like the sound bite is the story. Everything else is just the accoutrements. For the most part, I mean, you know, this is for a typical video. So I think if you're having, everyone has a different method, but that one has worked for me. And I think if you're having trouble, you know, getting started on a big edit, I would encourage you to try that method.
Okay, so when you are like tightening up a story, what are some of your go-to editing tools or techniques that you guys rely on the most?
So like I just said, you know, kill all the unnecessary stuff, all the ums, the ahs, the details, whatever's bogging it down, just get it out. And then this is like pretty simple, but rearrange stuff. Like sometimes these people are telling their story out of order. Maybe the guy says, I was living in New Orleans at the time and I started this company in 1989. Switch that. Take the end, put it at the beginning. I started this company in 1989. I was living in New Orleans at the time. You have a lot of power and control over your product here. You're not just an assembler, you're an editor. And finally, I think as like a little, like a trick or a tip or whatever, when you're transitioning or matching B-roll together, make sure the directions of the movement match. This is like such a little thing, but I see it in movies all the time. And I think it really contributes to sense of story because it makes it feel like we're headed somewhere. So like what I mean by that is if you have two panning B-roll shots back to back and one pans left to right and the other one pans right to left, and I hope I did that right in reverse. But if they're panning a different way, reverse one of the shots and then so they can match and they're both headed in the right direction towards the climax of the video. And it's like such a subtle little thing, but I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, those are totally things that like could seem off, but you're like, why didn't I like that? And then it matches and you're like, oh, wow, that was so cool. But most people like aren't going to put two and two together. They just know like, whoa, that looked great.
Yeah.
Totally. And I would say some obvious ones to me are sound design and music selection, which can sort of drive the piece to be a lot more engaging, more emotional with the right music. And then one other thing I think about is when to and when not to use B-roll. There will be certain sound bites that I feel like the subject needs to be seen. It's so impactful. So powerful what they're saying right here, that just resonates more when they're on screen. But when you're trimming down like fluff and stuff like that, then that would be a good time to use a lot of B-roll to kind of make sure the dialogue is as perfect as it can be, but then cover up any of those little bite-sized cuts.
Yeah. Cole, you and I are totally in sync on like just like get it to where it's like a perfect piece of dialogue. Don't worry about that. If you watch it with no B-roll over it, it's a guy, you know, like all jump cutty and stuff. And then you can always fix that stuff.
Okay, so what is your strategy for working with interviews or like dialogue heavy content to avoid redundancy while keeping the key beats intact?
I would sort of reiterate really knowing the dialogue inside and out, and then be willing to cut unnecessary sound bites that really don't add anything to the story. Don't be married to any exact sound bite. Just keep the ones that you need for the emotion and the context, and then anything else can kind of go.
What is your favorite story that you've told with MarketScale?
Well, I always talk about this one, but I love that jackhammer video that I did for MTX Audio. It's on their YouTube now, so we can talk about it and you can check it out. It's called the MTX Jackhammer Escalade, the show car that shook the world. They had this big, massive subwoofer. It was like a 400-pound subwoofer that they loaded into this Escalade to prove a point, because when they released that speaker, everyone in the industry said they were doing it to be egregious, and there was no way that you could realistically build that speaker into a car. And they were like, oh yeah, and then they loaded it into an Escalade, and it's just this absurd thing, but it's so cool. And I really love doing that video because the guy going through that build, Jason Plank, was so passionate about the car's history, and he had a lot of great stories. And we had time. That video was meant to be a lot. It's like a 17-minute video, so we had some time to stretch. But because he was so passionate about it, it really kind of shone through. And, you know, sometimes you have to use all those skills to make the stories really stand out. But in that case, Jason just made it really easy. So it was a lot of fun to do that one.
So my favorite story I've told with a MarketScale client is a company that manufactures educational devices for students learning another language. And the story centered around an orphanage in Mexico that is utilizing this device to teach their students English and give them a better chance at a prosperous future. Working on a video with that kind of message and change, positive change they're making in the world just gave me an extra bit of motivation to kind of like knock it out of the park.
So before we get off, do either of you have any closing remarks?
Sure. I think I would just reiterate something Luke mentioned early in the episode, is that the ability to tell a good story becomes second nature the more you do it. To any editor that is kind of struggling with that process, just know that the more you do it, the easier it comes.
And also watch stories, watch movies, and read books, and listen to stand-up, do whatever. And those influences will make you better.
Thank you both, Cole and Luke, for sharing your insights on the technical aspects of storytelling. If you're a video editor tuning in, we hope that this episode empowers you to flex your creativity and tell the client's story better than they ever thought that they could. Thank you for watching, and happy editing!